What's the housing market forecast looking like for 2023? Well, you could take my word for it, or you could listen to Barry Habib, who is an American entrepreneur, best-selling author, and the recipient of 3 Crystal Ball Awards for the accuracy of his real estate market forecast. That's a pretty good person to listen to. I had an opportunity to listen to his keynote speech a few weeks ago in San Diego, and I got a copy. So I'm going to be playing that keynote speech and giving some commentary over that so that you can come away from this really feeling empowered as a Bay Area home buyer or a Bay Area home seller and know what to expect for 2023 and beyond. So last week I was in a room full of like 1,000 other realtors from around the country, and the keynote speaker was Barry Habib, who is the CEO founder of MBS Highway, a highly respected mortgage and real estate news outlet. And he came on stage on Zoom. So this is like a Zoom call. He zoomed in to give the keynote, and it was absolutely incredible. He gave so much data, so much information, and I just could not wait to share this with you. So when I found out that I could actually share this presentation with everyone here that's a part of my ecosystem with SSV TV, I couldn't resist. I had to make this video as soon as possible. So we're going to get into that. But before we get into the video, if you are a home buyer in today's marketplace and you're looking for a comprehensive data set to assist you with your home buying decision making, you can text the word data plus the area or the neighborhood or the zip code that you're looking in, and we will send all that information sent straight to your inbox. And if you're a home seller in today's marketplace and you're trying to figure out, is now the right time for me to sell? And if so, what should I price my property for? All of that information can be found when you text the word data plus your property address to the number down below. All right, so let's get into the video.
Time with you wonderful people. And listen, there is a lot going on, but the chaos that we're going through does present lots of opportunities. It always does. I mean, I want you to think about this. All of your clients need you more than ever right now.
Now, remember, he's talking to realtors, so just to point that out. So clients meaning you.
If you think about going to Google Trends and seeing what are the most commonly searched trends today, they are housing bubble, they are inflation, the Fed, and these are things that we need to make sure that we are well aware of and we understand. So we're going to go through all of this today. We're going to make sure we understand where the housing market's going, where interest rates are going, where inflation's going, because they're all tied together. A lot of people think that mortgage rates, which are a big driver of the housing market, because as you know, for every 1% decline in mortgage rates, 5 million more people become eligible to purchase a home. And with anything, it's about supply and demand. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to take you to some very high level stuff, but I'm going to break it down.
This is a very interesting statistic and one that I think that we should all pay attention to. So as rates are going up and down and up and down and up and down, we are re-inviting and disinviting Americans from the dream of home ownership. So if we see rates come down, obviously that's going to open up the possibility for more buyers to enter the marketplace. So let's keep that in mind.
Price is higher. And as inflation
drives prices higher.
Inflation drives prices higher. And as inflation drives prices higher, it's really eroding your buying power. So the check still says the same amount of money, but it's not going as far. It's eroding. The buying power is disappearing slowly but surely. Now, when inflation is very low, that erosion is minimal. So you can offer a low interest rate and still be fine. But as inflation rises, the only defense you have is to charge a higher rate so you collect more money every month on that monthly payment to offset the more rapid rate of erosion from inflation. And that's it. So here's the lesson. When inflation goes up, mortgage rates go up. When inflation comes down, mortgage rates come down. So which way is inflation going? Because if we can understand this, then we can understand where mortgage rates are.
It makes sense. You're going to increase the rates to offset your costs. Makes sense.
Heading. And if we see mortgage rates heading a little bit lower, that's going to bring more buyers into a very tight inventory environment. Look, I don't have to tell you. You guys know better than anyone how tight the inventory environment is. So let's take a look at some slides and let's kind of go step by step here. So I really believe this is the opportunity that you have been waiting for in housing. But there is so much negativity, everybody, that they just miss it. I don't know if you folks saw the article that was in American Banker. And the article in American Banker says, is it time to quit mortgage and real estate? I mean, are you kidding me?
There's a lot of people talking about that right now. There's a lot of agents and people in the ecosystem, because of the low inventory and the low number of transactions, there are a lot of realtors and mortgage brokers getting out of the business. So this is true, but you'll see here in a second.
Is it time to quit? So what do they say? They say, you know what? Refinance volume is down 80%. Purchase volume is down 40%. So overall volume is like down 60%. And we're saying, we understand that, but let's understand where things are going. So we appreciate the warning from American Banker, but it's certainly not time to quit. Now, I told you that mortgage rates and inflation follow each other. So here's a prime example. The pink line here, that's inflation. The line in blue, those are mortgage rates. Here's over the last several years. Watch this. Inflation goes up. What do mortgage rates do? They go up. Inflation comes down. Mortgage rates come down. Inflation goes sideways. Mortgage rates go sideways. Even this little blip up in inflation leads to a blip up in mortgage rates. They're very closely correlated. Now, the shaded area here was the recession that we had in early 2020. People forget. We had a recession in February of 2020, and then at the end of March, we had a pandemic. So bang, bang, we had a double whammy, and the Fed panicked. The government panicked. They did all kinds of things to try and help. And what did they do? One of the things they did was they physically bought the mortgage market. They bought mortgage rates so that mortgage rates would be at around 3%. You do that by buying mortgage bonds. It has nothing to do with interest rate changes by the Fed. This is actually going in and buying mortgage-backed securities, putting it on their balance sheet, and they called that program quantitative easing, or QE. And notice during this,
pay attention to this, because it's super important to understand what happened at a government level that got us to the point that we're at right now.
QE period, mortgage rates, the blue line, see this 3% level? They stayed right at around 3%. Now that was okay initially when inflation was at 1%, but something started to happen. All that stimulus, all that QE, there's a lot of money floating around. And inflation started to rise. But the Fed said, don't worry about it. It's transitory, right? Well, they were dead wrong. And as inflation was taking off further and further and further, they finally woke up. Look, team, the reason we are in this mess that we are in right now is because the Fed did a very poor job. They were asleep at the wheel, and people in government kept on doling out stimulus money. I believe that a lot of it was necessary, but they continued to overdo it and overstimulate the economy. And the result is the inflation that we're all living with right now. And now what they're trying to do is they've gone to the printing press and they printed it, and now they got a vacuum cleaner out and they're trying to suck it up. And that's painful. The Fed's even said that's painful. So the inflation continued to rise, and the Fed finally said, hey, let's stop with the quantitative easing. And when they stopped with the quantitative easing, what did mortgage rates do? Well, now that the Fed wasn't buying the market, mortgage rates did what they always do, and they started to move hot.
So look at that graph right there. So that quantitative easing period, the QE period, was for the better part of almost basically 2 years here. Once that stopped, look at what happened to the rates. It kept up with inflation. So it was kind of down, and then they were like, all right, we're gonna get rid of this. But look, I mean, the damage had already been done. They had suppressed the rates for so long. And let's call it what it is too. From July of 2021 to January of 2022, that's when the most amount of damage was done, because that's when inflation really started to kick up, was from the early 2021 to like July of 2021.
Higher. Last spring and early summer, when inflation started to come down a little bit, so did mortgage rates. But then in the fall, when inflation took off, so did mortgage rates. Now, since the end of last year, we have seen inflation come down. And while not in a straight line, mortgage rates have come down as well. So the key question is, where do we go from here? Now, we think inflation comes down for lots of reasons. And one of them is we are starting to see a lot of discounts out there for prices in stores. Part of that is because inventory before the pandemic was already building. And then we had the pandemic and no goods were coming in. So remember when you used to go shopping and there was very little on the shelves, hard to get things, hard to get toilet paper. Remember all those horrible days? Well, we started to slowly open up, then China shut down. But now we've opened back up, supply chains are back up, and we're past previous inventories. In fact, it's like record levels of inventory. So what do? You have to put stuff on sale to get rid of it. You're getting bombarded with your emails with sale, discount. That is disinflationary, and that should help lead to lower interest rates. One of the big
That's important right here. And what I really love what Barry's doing is he's looking at all the lead metrics here, right? Because inflation is actually a lagging metric, right? but we're looking at the leading metrics that are going to then translate into inflation increasing or decreasing.
Components in determining inflation or interest rates. One of the big components in determining inflation are shelter costs. Shelter costs make up 43% of the inflation readings that you get. So that's a big number. But there's a problem with shelter, is that it lags. You see, in real time, shelter costs, which make up rents and owner's equivalent rent. You have to understand the way the government looks at inflation for housing. When they look at housing, it's called shelter. They don't look at home prices. They don't look at mortgage rates. Because if you think about it, what if somebody doesn't have a mortgage? What if they're paying different interest rates? What if their credit score is different? That's not inflationary. They consider housing a service. So the way they view housing and the changes in inflationary pressure is by taking a look at what rents are going for and the changes in rents and something they call owner's equivalent rent. How much do you think you could take your home and rent it out for? And that's the way that they determine it. Right, wrong, whatever. That's the system. So we have to understand how the game is played. So right now, as you can see, shelter costs have gone from going up 18% a year in January of 2022 to now going up just 3% a year. But the problem is the Fed does not look at, and the inflation numbers don't look at real time. They count the last 12 months, each month being equal. So back 12 months ago is carrying equal weight to where we are today. But here's what's even worse than that. If you signed your lease 10 months ago, that's fine. But what if you just told them, here's what I'm paying rent 10 months ago, but you signed your lease 8 months before that or 9 months before that? So it's a very long lag. It's somewhere between a year and a half lag before it shows up in the numbers that we see in the actual inflation readings that drive mortgage rates.
Cost of living, shelter costs are a critical component to this. And what Barry just broke down is how shelter costs from literally a year and a half ago could still be factoring into the consideration of whether or not we are in a inflationary market or not. So this is really good information. And something to note here is that like just 3 months ago is when things were really like coming to a point where they're similar to 2019 and early 2020 and 2018. So it will probably be another 12 to 15 months before we see these leading metrics affect the lagging metric of inflation.
Kind of like a roller coaster. The front of a roller coaster, when it reaches the apex, is heading lower, but the back is going up. So in real time, shelter costs are coming down, but the way it's shown in CPI, it's still going up. Here's the reading in CPI, and you can see it is still moving higher. Now, eventually, this will turn over, and I think it turns over very soon. So what I would like to show you here is what the lag looks like. You see this big drop that occurred? Well, we didn't see the drop occur until about a year later. And then when it started going up, we see the move up about a year later. So we can only imagine that this peak occurred about a year ago. So we should be very close to a peak. And soon enough, we should start to see this head lower and give us a little bit of relief from the pressure of inflation from shelter costs.
So even though I just said 12 to 15 months, but what Barry's saying is that we could see relief in a lot sooner time than that because the trajectory, the trend will be downwards. And that's good news for homebuyers.
Now you can do a mathematical calculation here. The difference between shelter costs in CPI and real time is about 4.9%. It weighs 43% of CPI. So it really is pushing CPI about 2% higher than it should be. So mortgage rates are probably about 1.5% higher than where they really should be. And eventually we should see that catch up. That means you should probably see mortgage rates perhaps sometime this summer in the mid 5, low 5. Who knows? We get lucky, maybe even tease 5% or get beneath it. But I believe that's where we're going. Now, just imagine what's going to happen to the housing market when you unleash a lot of buyers at around 5% or 5.5% mortgage rates in an environment where inventory is very, very tight. Now, you started to see some of this happen in January. Mortgage rates got to 6, and now you were starting to get multiple offers. So what's going to happen if we get below 6 for an extended period of time in an environment where inventory is even less than it was before? Well, you can imagine what happens when people start having multiple offers. Prices tend to move higher. So what caused mortgage rates to go up? Well, we know the Fed's culpable here. This is James Bullard. He is the St. Louis Fed president. And many Fed members, our Fed chair, many others have been referencing the jobs numbers that we got last month for the month of January. And they've been claiming, oh, a blowout jobs report, unemployment's ticking to a 50-year low. But team, you have to look deeper. Very few people do. Don't think the Fed does because they don't understand this stuff. Don't give them too much credit. They've never been in the real world. So when you take a look at the actual report, it showed 517,000 jobs gained last month. And everybody thought, oh my gosh, the job market's so hot. But doesn't it make you scratch your head? Because all we've been hearing about is all these layoffs. Who's hiring all these people? Well, this is from the job report, which has two components. One is the business survey, and the other is a household survey. The business survey showed 517,000 job creations. The household survey showed almost 900,000 job creations. Who the heck's hiring all these people, right? Well, they weren't hiring them. You see, if you look deep into the numbers, which the Fed doesn't do and most people don't do, you will see that we didn't gain 517,000 jobs. We actually lost. This is right from the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2,500,000 jobs in January. But what they said was, they said, well, normally you might see 3 million jobs lost in January from when people let those holiday shopping hires go. So we didn't gain 3 million jobs, 517,000 jobs. We lost 2.5 million, but they said we usually lose 3 million. So poof, it looks like we gained 500,000. Folks, we actually lost 2.5 million jobs. Now, when you take a look at the household survey, it showed 894,000 jobs created. But that's also a lot of gimmicks. One of those gimmicks, what was it? It's something called the population control effect. That sounds like it should be in a sci-fi movie, right? Well, what they said was we picked up workers that we missed. They were undocumented workers from early 2022, January, February, March of 2022, to the tune of about 810,000 of them. Now, from a logical standpoint, wouldn't you just go back and revise those months to reflect the accurate amount of jobs? No, not our government. You know what they did? They said, we'll just throw them into January of 2023. They were not in January of 2023. Because they did that, we showed 894,000 jobs gained, but really, after figuring out this population control effect, there were only 84,000 jobs created, not 894. And as a result, people said it's a 50-year low in unemployment at 3.4%, but the real unemployment rate, if you didn't have that effect, was 3.9%. Very different story. It's important that you understand what goes on because eventually this catches up. And the way that the jobs market looks, if it's really hot, it makes mortgage rates worse. When this eventually catches up, you will see mortgage rates improve. And we saw the benefit of that today. We got the jobs report today. It came in 311,000 jobs, but there was some revisions. And what we saw here was that the unemployment rate went up because we didn't have that fake stuff going in there from 3.4 to 3.6%. But there was something in there that was very, very interesting. And that was called the duration of employment of people unemployed less than 5 weeks. So that was an astonishing amount of growth. 343,000 more people were unemployed for less than 5 weeks from last month's report. I want you to think of a bucket. Imagine a bucket being filled with water on one side, but then having a hole where it drains on the other. Well, this bucket of unemployed people for 5 weeks or less rose by 343. So that means more water should have come in, but it didn't. Initial jobless claims were not coming in. You see, there was only 194,000 initial jobless claims, not very many. So why did the bucket fill? Is because it was harder for people to find a job. It was taking them longer than 5 weeks to find a job. So that's telling us that the job market is slowing. Otherwise, we wouldn't see this suddenly rise by 343,000. And the big growth of the job market has been leisure and hospitality. It's been adding more than 100,000 jobs each month. And today's report for February was no exception, 105,000 jobs gained. But I want you to take a look at this chart. This is the jobs in leisure and hospitality. Then COVID came and it all got shut down. But since then, look at the huge amount of jobs. Half of all the job gains since COVID have been people getting their jobs back from leisure and hospitality. But take a look, we're almost back to normal. And now, while we don't know exactly where normal is, there's not a lot more juice to squeeze out of this. And when you take a look at what the future looks like, there's the job openings and labor turnover report. Now, this report is job postings. This is, I put an article out, or I put something out on LinkedIn or Indeed or ZipRecruiter that I want to hire somebody, right? So these are help wanted in my restaurant, okay, or in my hotel for these types of leisure and hospitality. Well, for the first time, that dropped in the latest report. It dropped by 194,000. Now, if you have less job openings, then eventually there's less job hirings, and that supports our theory that the engine of job growth is going to slow.
So listen to what he's saying. What he's saying is that leisure hospitality has been one of the main drivers of job growth as a whole here in the States. And we're getting to a point where we're pretty much matching where we were right before COVID. And so that sector of job growth is going to be eliminated. And so what we're left with then is like, look at the rest of it is like, oh, suddenly this rising tide isn't rising so quickly or at all anymore. And it's not lifting up the collective ship. Something to pay attention to for sure.
To see a slowdown here, and that is good for mortgage rates and probably lead to a recession. So why haven't we been in a recession? Well, likely because people are...
I know what you're thinking. How can this be good news? Wait for it.
Staving it off based upon their savings and credit cards. Let me explain. The top line is credit card balances. So notice how before COVID, and this is the recession and COVID period, we were jacking up our credit cards pretty darn good. And our savings rate was just under 10%. So about 10% of what we made, we were saving. But then we had the recession and then COVID, bang, bang, bang. So what did the government do? Hey, we got to help. Here's a great big stimulus check. Now everything's shut down. So I got nothing to do. So that money went right to my bank account. And the only thing I could spend it on is paying off my credit cards. And look at this. You pay off your credit cards by draining your savings. It's just amazing what happened here, right? And then right behind that, I got another stimulus check. So I don't own anything on my credit cards. Let's go out and spend it. I like some name brand stuff. Let's go and buy stuff at the mall. Let's do that. And we spent the second stimulus much faster than the first. But don't worry, we got another third stimulus, even bigger. But we spent that even faster. So I guess people like the stimulus lifestyle. So when the stimulus stopped, how'd they keep the party going?
Got to coin that phrase, the stimulus lifestyle.
Well, my credit cards don't have any balances, so I'll just start charging away. And I got money in savings. How about if I suck the money out of there? Now, our savings rate used to be 10%. Now it's 3.5%. And our credit card balances, which are paid off, are now at all-time record highs. Ladies and gentlemen, even this has an expiration date. And when it happens, the economy hits the wall. We get job losses. We get a recession. Now, how does a recession affect us in mortgage and real estate? Well, you should know that mortgage rates always go down during recessions. Here's 60 years worth of data. The last recession went down 1%, then more. The one before, more than 1%, then more. Almost 1%, then more than 2%, then more. 5%, then more. 4%. You get the picture. Mortgage rates go down during recessions. Okay, but isn't that bad for real estate? Because that's what the media is going to say. The media's going to get out there and they're going to say, oh, we're heading for a recession. Don't buy any real estate. They couldn't be further from the truth. Now, what's the bad thing about a recession? About 1.5 million people will temporarily and sadly lose their jobs.
Yeah, and this is important, right? So like a lot of the things that we're experiencing right now, especially here in the Bay Area, we're experiencing job loss. We are experiencing, and so these are really real things. So in no way is this meant to be an insensitive type of analysis, but it is what it is. The flip side to that, though, is that to counteract the natural tendencies of the consumers to retract in a recessionary period, what does the government do? They stimulate spending by decreasing mortgage rates.
So chances are they may not be eligible to be a home buyer at that point. But for every 1% drop, you now have 5 million new people that now can become eligible. So the new entrants overwhelm those who are no longer eligible. And that's why the next chart shows you that housing always does well during recessions. But that's not what the media says. Here's Diana Olick. Diana Olick will tell you on CNBC every single day for the last 8 years that there's a housing bubble, right? If you listen to the media or people like this, here's what you heard. Back in 2015, 8 years ago, she said, we're in a housing bubble larger than 2006, but all prices have done has gone up since then, right? So if you missed out on buying a $300,000 home that year, you lost $15,000. The next year, she says, hey, we're in a new housing bubble. So rather than say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, we're in a new housing bubble. So prices went up again that year. The following year, she said, homeownership does not build wealth. That was 6 years ago, rather. Does that, you know anybody who has not built wealth in real estate in the past 6 years? And of course, prices went up. 5 years ago, she says, it's better to rent than to buy in today's housing market. Please show me the one person who says, oh, thank goodness for the last 5 years, I've been throwing my money away on rent, paying my landlord's mortgage, and missed out on all the amazing appreciation. Show me the one person, okay? So wrong again. The following year, in the middle of the year, she says, hey, before you buy your home, think twice, watch my special report, which was, the housing market's about to shift in a bad way. Well, it didn't shift in a bad way. Prices kept going up. So her scare tactics, if they affected people, they missed out again. And then at the end of 2019, she gave her forecast for 2020 saying, don't buy, rent, because next year's going to be hard on the housing market. Well, it was only hard if you didn't buy a home because prices went up 16%. And then a year and a half ago, she goes, the housing boom, it's over. As sales fall to a pandemic low, but since then we've seen prices go up 18%. You know, home prices have nearly doubled since she's been spewing this poison and yelling, there's a housing bubble, there's a housing bubble, there's a housing bubble. And here it illustrates to you what happens during recessions for home values. Here is 80 years worth of data, and you can see all the recessions. All these shaded areas, recessions, home values up, 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 up during and after recession, 8 out of 9 times. Only one time it didn't, but here we have some special circumstances. The bubble came before the recession, not the recession causing the bubble. In fact, it was the recession that kind of started to help things level off. But what caused the housing bubble? What caused the housing bubble? It was simply too much supply of homes and not enough demand. So just like anything else, when there's too much of it and not enough people that buy it, prices go down. So how do we measure supply and demand? Supply of homes is...
And this is where we're going to end it on this one. We are going to do a multi-part breakdown and dissection of this video, but that's the perfect place to end it. One of the things that I've said over and over and over again on this channel is this very fact. We've come back to this statistic so many times. 8 out of the last 9 recessions, we have seen housing prices go up, which is so counterintuitive. People are so resistant to this idea, but the data doesn't lie. And the reason is for that, the previous slide where we see mortgage rates. Well, when mortgage rates come down, we're inviting new people into the market. And so regardless of what's happening with the economy, there's going to be enough people with jobs that want to own a home. And that is ultimately what drives the market. We're going to be posting part 2 to this here very, very soon. But if you like this video and you're still watching, first of all, thanks for sticking around. And if you're still not subscribed to this channel for some weird reason, click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and a thumbs up while you're at it. It helps us get in front of more people like yourself, and it helps us stay in front of you too, so that you can see all of the latest housing data and trends here in Silicon Valley and the entire San Francisco Bay Area. This is Danny Gould. I'm selling Silicon Valley, and I will catch all of you in the next Silicon Valley Snapshot.